Okay, we're going to move on to the next lesson in chapter 9, and that's lesson 9.5. And this lesson is about the cost of operating and maintaining a vehicle. So when you have a car, it's not just buying the car and putting gas that you have to do. There's a lot of maintenance involved, and there's things that you have to pay for. So let me go over a few definitions. The first one would be the variable cost. Variable means change. So the variable cost change depending on how much you drive. And the more you drive, the higher the variable costs will be. The less you drive, the lower they'll be. Examples of variable costs would be like gas. Obviously, if you drive more, you're going to spend more on gas. And then the opposite is true. Tires need to be rotated and replaced every so many miles. So the more you drive, the more frequently you're going to have to rotate and replace the tires. So it gets more expensive the more you drive. And then oil changes, same thing. They have to be done after every certain number of miles. So the more you drive, the more often you do that and you spend more money. So these are examples of variable costs. Fixed is something that doesn't change. So no matter what you drive, you're going to pay the same in fixed cost every year. So for example, insurance. They do have different quotes for insurance, different prices. So if you drive more, you pay a certain amount. If you drive less, you can pay less. But once you choose which plan you want in your insurance, you're going to pay the same no matter what. And then the DMV fees, like registration, you're going to pay whatever it is no matter what you drive. And then depreciation isn't something that you pay for every year, but it's losing the value in your vehicle, which takes us to the next definition. So depreciation, when you buy a new car, it's worth a certain amount. And then when you drive it off the lot, it's no longer new, so it loses value. In other words, it depreciates. So depreciates means a loss in value. And then as time goes by, because you've had it and you've been using it and it's getting older, the value goes down. So we say that the car depreciates, or in other words, the value goes down. Okay, so those are the three definitions for this lesson. The formulas, I wrote them in red. So depreciation is calculated by getting the purchase price, so whatever you paid for the car, minus the value of the car today, or today's worth. And usually you can get that from like Kelly's Blue Book. You put the condition of your car, the miles that it has, and then it tells you more or less what it's worth. And then you divide that by how many years you've owned the car, and that tells you the depreciation, or how much value it has lost. Of course, the more years you own the car, the more it depreciates. And then you also have the cost per mile. So when you drive, you have to pay a certain amount for every mile that you drive. So the way you calculate that is the total of your variable cost for the year, the annual variable cost, plus the total for the fixed cost for the year, divided by how many miles you drive. So typically they say that on average people drive around 10 to 12,000 miles a year, but that can vary a lot depending on your lifestyle, your job, and a lot of things. So some people drive less, some people drive more. But these are the formulas that we're going to use. So let's look at an example. Okay, so this example is on page 327 in your book if you want to follow along. So it says that Anne bought a vehicle used for $4,000, and she bought it a year ago. And in a year, she drove 9,000 miles. And she kept a record of everything that she spent, a variable and fixed cost for her car. After a year, she thinks that now her car is worth $3,200. So the question is, what's the cost per mile for last year? Okay, so if we look at the formula, the cost per mile is the total of the annual variable and annual fixed cost, which you don't have to calculate, they're right here. This is a total for the variable cost, that's a total for the fixed cost. So we add these two, divided by how many miles were driven. So in this case, 9,000 miles were driven. So all you have to do is add these two. That would be the numerator, divided by the number of miles, which is 9,000. So it looks like this. So you're going to add the 973, which is the total variable cost, plus the 1261, the total fixed cost, divided by 9,000. So you get 0.25 or 25 cents per mile. So that means that every time you drive, you're spending about 25 cents on each mile. Okay, let's do one more example. Okay, so for this example, it says that Lucas purchased a new car, and the car was $21,750. That was 2 years ago. Okay, in 2 years, the value has gone down to $13,920. And the annual variable costs are about $595. And the insurance is $1,461. And then he also paid $112.6 for license and registration, and that's how many miles he drove, 16,500. So it says, after computing the depreciation and the total annual cost, find the cost per mile. Okay, so first we have to compute the depreciation. So it might seem like a lot because they did give us a lot of info in the problem, but let's just go back to the way that we calculate depreciation. So if we look at our notes, depreciation is the purchase price minus what it's worth today divided by how many years it's been owned. Okay, so let's look for those things. Okay, so the purchase price, so that would be $21,750 minus what it's worth today. So that would be minus $13,920. So this minus this, divided by how many years they've owned the car, and that would only be 2 years. Okay, so I get this minus this divided by 2. Okay, so here it is. The purchase price, that's how much they paid for it when they bought it brand new. This is how much they estimate it's worth today, and they've had it for 2 years, so you divide by 2. That gives you $3,915. So that's how much value it has lost with time. And then it says, then find the cost per mile. So it's the same thing. Just go back to the formula. The cost per mile is the annual variable cost plus the annual fixed cost. Okay, so going back to the problem, the annual variable cost, it's right here. It's $595, and then plus we're gonna add the fixed cost. And instead of giving you a total, they just gave it to you in parts. So the fixed cost would be the insurance plus the license and registration plus the depreciation. So it would be these three things. And then you add everything up. So let me just go over one more time the things that you add up. Okay, so you're gonna add up the variable cost and the fixed cost. Fixed cost is insurance, DMV fees, depreciation. Okay, so going back to the problem, the variable costs are $595. So that's this. And the fixed costs are things like insurance, DMV fees, and depreciation. So insurance, $1,461, DMV fees, $112.6, and then depreciation, $39.15. So you add those three things and you get $6,083. So that's the total of the variable and fixed cost. And then you have to divide by how many miles were driven. So how many miles do they drive? 16,500. So you divide by the total number of miles, and in this case the cost was a little more expensive than the previous example. It'd be 0.37 or 37 cents per mile. Okay, so what you need to do is just follow these formulas. The one for depreciation and cost per mile, and then you'll be able to calculate whatever they're asking you.